Hello there, ladies, gentlemen, and cyborgs. I am Zach Friedman of Voidstar Lab, the mercenary hardware hacker agency, and you are in my head. Welcome to my weekly podcast where I talk about wearable technology, Google Glass, the future, and the business of building technology, among other things. New episodes every Monday. This week, I'm going to talk about wearable cameras. When Google Glass was first announced, I saw it had a camera, and I said, "Oh boy, they put a camera on it. That's bad." Probably correctly. Before Google Glass, really all wearable, all heads-up displays. I try not to use the terms interchangeably. They were memory prosthetics, right? Sure, Steve Mann's original wearable connected to a camera, but it was certainly not a wearable camera. The discussion around wearable computers really dealt with human enhancement to some degree. Enhancing your abilities or enhancing your situational awareness. Like the heads-up displays, right, were used by the military to see overhead maps and. Used by guys like Professor Starner to Dr. Starner, I guess, to augment their memory. But when Glass was announced with the camera, suddenly none of the discussion was about human enhancement. None of it was about the merits of wearing a computer versus holding a computer. The discussions were all about everybody having a camera and spying on everybody in some way, shape, or form. It immediately changed the discussion. The discussion about Google Glass has almost never been about, it's almost never about human enhancement. It was all about what happens in a society where people are wearing cameras and everyone has to be camera ready at all times. It's a very important issue, especially if, as a lot of the other glass holes believe, glass becomes mainstream. The dynamics of people wearing cameras is going to get. It's going to get very relevant, so I want to dive in a little bit and explore it. Now, if I had recorded this podcast a few months ago, I would have been horribly uninformed and very ignorant. Since then, I've talked to a lot of people who have really changed my not so much changed my opinion, but exposed me to truths about social dynamics that I didn't really understand, which is to say that I am a fairly attractive white male, which means that I don't really get a lot of, and I don't really look Jewish, which means I don't really get a lot of attention from arbitrary haters. Generally, my haters tend to have a reason to hate me instead of just, really pulling one out of their ass. Which is to say that I kind of get special treatment when it comes to this, so I'm going to try as hard as I can to talk about all these issues with regards to other people. That said, to protect people involved, I'm not going to mention any names or implied genders. So there you go. So what really made this an interesting issue for me was Donglegate. I don't know if the term Donglegate is as widely known as it is in my circles, but basically it refers to this incident that happened at the Python conference, like last year, like 2013 or 2012. Where two white male, of course, conference goers made a very loud joke about it's like very sexual, something about inserting a dongle or pushing a repo and stuff like that. It was basically a lot of crude sexual jokes, and a person in the audience turned around and took a picture of them and tweeted the picture along with the comments. This basically ignited a huge shitstorm that led to everyone involved being fired. The conference itself released, a formal, they released like a formal apology, it was a massive shakeup. Everyone involved got a huge after the dust had cleared. Basically, everyone involved got just a huge amount of attention from trolls, like to a pretty hilarious degree. But the point is that this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Of course, people always talk about how, oh man, I heard some guy say like the most offensive stuff, blah blah blah. One lane open to Holland Tunnel. I should probably take the Parkway, or the Turnpike. Yeah, so this happens often, and people tweet about this stuff all the time, but what was different this time was that this person took a picture of the guys who made the joke and tweeted it. And that was what set it off. These guys could no longer, these guys couldn't hide under anonymity anymore. Their appearance and the way they were smirking at the camera really fueled the picture taker's cause. I seriously doubt that any of this would have happened if the person hadn't taken a picture of these two guys. To me, this made It's made it very interesting. I guess I tend to be a little idealistic when it comes to these social issues, but the fallout for the picture taker was ridiculous. They got doxxed on 4chan, which means that they uncovered personal information and just massive trolling, death threats, rape threats, and or violence threats, depending on the gender of the person. Just the whole 9 yards. I don't know whether or not he or she actually had anyone make good on them. Clearly, the death threats, not because I talked to the person, but it's very interesting. I asked the person later. I really wanted to do an interview. I thought the story was very interesting. The whole part of it. They said that they really wanted to avoid negative attention. Even though the story, the media cycle has long since died out on it. It's still relevant, I guess. Going public can actually still hurt them, and every part of this dynamic is very interesting. The way they summed it up was that if you're a group that's already kind of socially oppressed, not in America we have very little de jure segregation and various forms of bigotry are becoming increasingly socially unacceptable, but people still do it, especially at the government level. I mean, you can't be a bigot at the government level, but you can certainly at a societal level. Anyways, I found that very interesting. So the reason why I bring up all this story, I know it took 8 minutes. Thank you for bearing with me so far. The reason why I bring this up is because if Google Glass or other wearables takes off and everyone's wearing a camera, what's going to happen? Now, Steve Mann has made his opinion on this. Steve Mann, of course, one of the godfathers of wearable technology and a longtime wearable camera wielder, has drawn a hard line on this. He says that surveillance, which is sort of the opposite of surveillance, surveillance being an authority watching you, surveillance being you watching an authority, along with equivalence, which is people watching other people, will kind of keep society in line. I think it's a very interesting. Concept, especially in the abstract, because in reality, it tends to be a little more complicated. So let's explore a little bit. Now, I bring up Steve Mann because, I've called him out about this. Steve Mann. Although he's really the godfather of wearable technology, his thing is really, apart from the hydrophone, his thing is really surveillance. That's really his baby. This concept that Joes on the street armed with persistent cameras and sensors can enforce accountability and discipline on authorities, big corporations, government, etc. So, Dr. Mann, wearing his heads-up display, although it's not really wearing because it's bolted to his head. I guess it's technically an implant. Whatever. Point is, he had a camera attached to his face, and he was physically thrown out of a McDonald's. And his camera is, of course, it's designed with all his algorithms. So when he is manhandled, it begins a circular buffer and records. So this guy had detailed pictures and detailed video of the entire incident. According to him, it was an entirely unprovoked physical attack. He was manhandled out. And this was in France. It's very much illegal. So intuitively, I would think that what he would do is he would take that footage, right, and either present it to the authorities, and if the authorities are, present it to McDonald's, for instance, and if McDonald's doesn't make things right, he would put it on the internet, right, or present it to a judge. If the judge doesn't give him the ruling he wants, he puts it on the internet. I mean, that's surveillance in action, but he didn't. He's sitting on the footage. There is a real weak spot in the concept of surveillance, which is that the technology isn't enough. First off, technology isn't enough. A person who is using the technology needs to be willing to use it, and by doing so, the thing about it, by doing so, you open yourself up to attack. If Dr. Mann did put the footage online, of course he would have, McDonald's would go into full, quills out legal self-defense mode, and just pull out everything in the book. Likewise, if this person, the person I was talking about before, who published pictures of people who made a fairly gross comment, she opened herself up to massive hate. Now, the crux of Mann's argument about surveillance is that the presence of cameras enforces like accountability and discipline. I respectfully disagree. I think that the presence of a camera once it becomes ubiquitous, people will stop acting as though we're around. It just becomes a part of daily life. And as long as people fear the countermeasures, it's going to be slightly limited. It will enforce if people are able to record footage of police impropriety and politicians breaking the law and corporations trying to do things that are not tasteful, and other people just being pigs. Well, simply having the footage isn't good enough. You have to do something with it. Now, a camera is. Have you ever seen Max Headroom? Great show, by the way. I definitely owe it to watch it. But if you've ever noticed the motif, they treat cameras as weapons. They literally they don't call the things that the journalists carry a camera. They call it the camera gun, and it has a stock, and it has video cassettes that slot in like ammunition, and they wield it, and they treat it as though it were a gun. It's a very apt metaphor. This sort of hot footage is a weapon, but you have to remember that, like any weapon, like nearly all weapons, unless you are an expert with using it, you will not kill the target in one shot. And as Machiavelli implied, if you don't kill the opponent with one shot, then they will counterattack. And especially if you're talking about surveillance, right? And you are using your camera weapon to fight against an establishment like the government or major corporation or societal norms that men can make jokes about penises, well, you're going to face massive resistance. So the question is, are you man enough to deal with the consequences? Are you man enough to draw your gun and basically open fire, I would say unprovoked, because from society at large's point of view, it is unprovoked. From your point of view, it's entirely justified. But are you willing to do that, accept the consequences, and manage your story and all the attendant stuff that goes along with an expose? Well, I feel like to a lot of people, no, they're not. And this will really kill surveillance. But for a lot of people, they will. What's interesting about this is that in the past, right, the Cold War era dystopian novels, really where the modern dystopia comes from, was all about authorities oppressing people. I'm talking like 1984, which is very obvious, and Brave New World, and even things like Gibson's novels. These are all dystopias because of outside factors, but surveillance really does have the ability to keep authorities in check. But if people aren't using it, really those are intrinsic factors. Things like being afraid of rebuttals, being afraid of retaliation, and being afraid of societal backlash, and being afraid of being fired, etc., etc. These are internal. So effectively, if we accept that the ability to record evidence anytime and make it public anytime is a powerful tool for improving social order, well, people are gonna voluntarily keep themselves in a dystopia because of personal reasons. I find it very interesting. We're voluntarily keeping ourselves oppressed. Who needs, in this lens, right? Who needs a government? Who needs the thought police? People are doing it themselves. I find it very interesting. Whistleblowers are being demonized increasingly. I really think that the powers that be are starting to respect the power that sort of ubiquitous evidence gathering has, because really that's what it is. When you're taking a video of something, you're recording evidence. They're starting to respect. You're starting to see this. Whistleblower laws are being fought back against, especially when it comes to blowing the whistle on government agencies. The word terrorist keeps getting thrown around. Terrorist is, of course, an amorphous threat, because as soon as you cease to be afraid of the terrorists, they're simply murderers and vandals. But the word keeps getting thrown around because it's very good to quash whistleblowers. I think that there are clearly some powerful people who are afraid of this possibility. The question is whether people are willing to put their necks on the line to make it work. Will they? I don't think so. I think most people I wouldn't say apathetic, but they really want to protect their neck. You will see people who will effectively die for a cause. They'll record highly incriminating evidence against a person or an organization. They'll make it public. They'll face massive retaliation that could permanently cost them their job, blackball them, and bankrupt them. But it'll work. People who think that surveillance, there's some people who think that equivalence and surveillance will stabilize society because it'll kind of get people to think in media mode. Perhaps in the far future, the same way that celebrities tried to, many celebrities who aren't Jennifer Lawrence attempt to, they really guard their words because they know that anything out there that they say is going to get misrepresented and thrown out in public. So some people may switch to media mode, but I have a feeling that most people won't. This won't stabilize society. In fact, it will destabilize it. A big stabilizing factor of society is that you have extremely powerful organizations that can defend themselves. And the combination of them defending themselves and the threat of defending themselves, like if you're attacking McDonald's, you're going to be sued by McDonald's. The threat of activation of that lawsuit is enough to it's really enough to prevent a lot of the fighting against it. That said, when it becomes really easy to get really high quality evidence and to publicize it widespread in an instant, this dynamic is going to change a little bit. People are going to be drawing this is a powerful weapon. You don't need to, this isn't like PETA, this isn't like the PETA exposés back in the day where they had to, smuggle some elaborate camera thing in a handbag in order to take pictures of the inside of the meat processing plant. I mean, this is everywhere, every time. So this will destabilize it, the order, so to speak. People will become, it drops the barriers of entry to being a rabble rouser. into being a shit disturber. You know, people are going to raise more hell. They're going to draw this powerful gun more often. And because this is evidence, it's going to be more decisive. And the people in question, because like think of it, if it's the truth, you can't rebut it. You have to, you know, misinform. You have to attack the person. You have to try to undermine the footage. You have to try to cut it off or gag it. You have to fight dirty because you don't have the ability to say this is wrong and here's why. So the fights are going to get very vicious. So far from stabilizing society and keeping people honest, at the very beginning at least, this is going to cause a little bit of instability and is going to incite a lot of knee-jerk lying. Over the grand scheme of things, over the long term, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I think it'll be positive. People will realize that, especially as data analytics and data collection become more accessible, people are going to realize that, like, you really can't sweep things under the rug anymore. Either someone's watching or someone will pick up the fingerprints. So at least for now, be prepared for a bunch of fighting and be prepared to well, if you're going to blow the whistle on someone using Google Glass, be prepared to make it your life's work. In the grand scheme of things, you know, we never know what's going to happen. The future is a crazy place. Well, I'll see you there.